Welcome to Immigreats, the podcast where we get to tell stories of immigrants that are doing great things in their adopted countries. I'm excited today because we're doing something we've never done before, an actual Immigreats interview. The idea behind these interviews is to hear directly from the immigrants themselves who've done incredible things. And I'm trying to focus on bringing immigrants whose stories you wouldn't be able to find online easily just because they've been going about their business for many years quietly behind the scenes and just doing amazing things and making great impact. So I'm excited because the very first interview we'll get to do is of Miss Effie Hwande. I'll ask her to tell a little bit about herself, and hopefully by the end of this interview, you'll see why I wanted her story to be told and why I've been learning so much from her myself. Welcome to Immigreats.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please tell us a little bit about you. Who is Effie? Where are you from? And how did you become an immigrant? Just a bit of that story.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that introduction.
Glad to have you.
My name is Effie Hwande. I am originally from Zimbabwe, born and raised in Zimbabwe. To be more specific, born and raised in Mbare, Harare.
I like Mbare and I like
Mbare,
Zimbabwe.
Harare.
Yeah.
And I left Zimbabwe at the age of 18 and moved to the UK, specifically London, and where I stayed and worked and went to school for a number of years, about 23 years. And then from there moved to the US. But who is Effie? I am a mother. I am a provoker. I think that's how I define myself. I come in to stir up things. I am the one who wants to shake things up a little bit. And I'm not satisfied with status quo.
I like that.
So that's who I am as a person. But above all, I am a mother. I am a sister. I am a daughter. I am a Zimbabwean. I am proud to be Zimbabwean. And I am a person who contributes to the social economy, to wealth generation, wealth building, and business coaching.
That's excellent. Thank you. That's a great introduction. We'd love to let the audience hear more about the process of you moving from Zimbabwe to the UK. You said you were 18 years old.
Yes.
What led you to leave Zimbabwe? What was it that made you want to move to the UK?
So I actually laugh about it because at the time there seemed to be a trend with my sisters working for my dad. And from what I observed, they were not being paid enough and on time or regularly. So I decided...
The roof over their head was their pay.
The roof over their head called the shots. So I decided I was going to leave. And I remember so clearly the weeks leading up to my final exams, A-level exams. I went to my dad and said, if you want a peaceful life, let me go somewhere to just discover something different. I think that's been who I have been all along, is I'm curious to know. I ask a lot of questions and I want to know how things work, how things operate. So I think it was much against his wishes. He allowed and he facilitated it was a return ticket to the UK. And at the time, it was easy. Coming from Zimbabwe, we were very welcome. So the immigration process was not as complicated. So that was the first place. And I would have considered the US, but I needed a visa.
Yeah, because back then you could just get with a Zimbabwean passport, you could just get on a flight to the UK, no questions asked, really.
Exactly. And the Zim dollar was 1-to-1 with the pound sterling. So there was no qualm around how will you make things work, because financially it was achievable.
That's very interesting. Talk to us about what happened. So you were 18, you've arrived in the UK. What did you end up choosing as your path, and how did that unfold?
So it wasn't as glossy or as glorious as it sounds. I remember initially, there were days I would call my mom crying because the culture shock, the change of lifestyle, it was something that I wasn't accustomed to. And she would say, come back. And I said, no, let me give it a chance. So initially, the first job I had was actually in McDonald's. But when I reflect on that, it was the foundation of a lot of operational systems that I've implemented in business. So there was a lot of learning from that. So I started working in McDonald's, and within a short time, a friend said, hey, there's jobs at this nursing home. Why don't you come? And they're giving accommodation. So I'm an immigrant. I don't have a lot of money. So I said, sure. And I took it up. And while I was there, I thought, wait a minute, I'm seeing all these nurses who've made this a career. And there was an offer at the time that if you did nursing studies, you would actually be paid a salary while you were studying.
Going to school.
So you would get the education, you'd get a salary, and you would end up with accommodation as well. At the time, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I took it.
So it was very practical. I need money, I need a place to live, and any other route you pursue, you're having to pay to go to school.
Definitely.
But becoming a nurse, you're getting paid to go to school.
Yes.
So it was a simple thing. I'm just going to do this, get the qualification, make some money in the process, and then figure things out after that.
Exactly. And then what's amazing is from that decision, a number of careers have come through that. A number of businesses have come through that. A level of understanding has come from those decisions. So yes, it was an entry point, and yet I became passionate about nursing. I fell in love with the ability to come in and make a difference into people's lives at a critical time in their lives as well.
That's awesome. I spent quite a bit of time mentoring, young men and women. And one of the things that I've realized over the years, and I share this with them all the time, is many of life's opportunities just come from being practical.
Yeah.
And so if you step through a particular door just for practical reasons, even if it's not the thing for you, it will always lead to the thing. And so it's one of those things that even with my own kids, I'm trying to teach them, because I think we're living in a world where with social media, it almost creates this impression that, you can go from, 0 to 100 overnight.
Yes.
And your dream career, your dream job is there for the taking, even at age 18. And that might be true for some people, but for the majority of us, there's a journey, steps of just doing what you have to do, what makes sense, what puts, a roof over your head and keeps you safe, but ultimately feels like, God always opens the doors through it. So sounds like that was your experience.
That was definitely my experience.
No, that's fantastic. I'm glad to be able to share this story. So you're done with your nursing education, you've got your nursing qualifications. What happens next? And I'd like for you to actually even go into you starting to discover your entrepreneurial chops, as it were.
So the entrepreneurial chops started from an earlier age.
Okay.
At 16. My parents used to buy and sell used clothing, and I would help myself to some of those, clean them up. I actually had an enterprise.
Okay.
Our gardener was the person who went to collect the money and deliver the goods.
So you were selling on credit?
I sold on credit.
Okay.
And month end, he would go and pick up the money. And it worked well.
Okay.
So I think what I'm saying is it's always been in me to have that level of curiosity around building business or establishing an enterprise.
That's really cool. You are now a nurse, and did you then just work initially for the government, the NHS in the UK as a nurse? And how long did you work in that space before kind of branching out?
So I qualify as a nurse, and I started working as an agency nurse. I wanted the freedom to try different specialist areas. I wanted the freedom to decide which employer I wanted to work with.
So an agency nurse is not tied down to a specific hospital or institution.
No.
You get to kind of pick and choose where you want to go and how long you want to be there.
Yes.
Okay.
So I did that, but I always had a desire to be in communication. So I then used the nursing experience and qualification and started working in healthcare advertising. So an opportunity was presented. I insisted, where I approached an organization and said, look, I am a nurse, but I have an interest in advertising. How can I work? They wouldn't give me anything. So I said, okay, I'll come and volunteer. And I think initially I was doing 2 days. I would go in and volunteer my service. And within a short space of time, a position was created. And that position then opened an opportunity in the US. So very early on in my career, I had an opportunity to come and work with a healthcare communications company in the US. So again, that's opened my eyes to the possibilities of what else you could do with nursing. I worked with pharmaceutical companies, creating marketing campaigns for products that were launching. I worked with a healthcare broadcasting company that was bringing in doctors and specialists to talk about a particular health area of interest. So nursing created a lot of opportunities. And I think sometimes people want to look at things in one particular way and not explore the fullness of what you can achieve.
I like that. We're actually at a stage in our family where our daughter is in high school, and the curriculum from her school gave her an opportunity to pick kind of from a couple of different possible career tracks, right? Mm-hmm. So without locking her into anything, permanently,
yes,
she can take some courses. They had a healthcare track, they had a computer science track, agriculture, engineering, and a number of other options, and then a general business track.
Yeah.
And our daughter, Tanatso, believes she wants to become an entrepreneur. She wants to be a business owner when she's older, which I love the sound of that, and I definitely support it. But when we were talking through her options, because of what she believes she wants to do when she's older, she wanted to take the business track at school. But I ended up coming back and actually challenging her to go a different route, to actually say, here's something I've learned, is that business is not necessarily a skill, right? Business is, you're selling a product. And what you're talking about is you realizing that healthcare itself is a product, can be commoditized.
Yes.
And there are ways to actually sell that product. So you don't necessarily have to be a nurse in the operating room or a nurse, in the hospital ward to be in healthcare. And you don't necessarily have to be stuck earning a salary as a nurse. You can build businesses or complementary products to the healthcare sector. And so that's something I was trying to get her to understand, to say the things that you will learn now, the basic management principles and things that you learn now are things that you can learn later, for sure. But the most successful business people that I know, even when we talk about the big names out there, they are engineers who went into business. They are mathematicians who went into business. They were doctors who went into business. And so you've almost got to get that core skill and then use it to go into business. Most times, I've seen that to be a formula that seems to work. So it's interesting as I'm listening to you talk, and even some of the other immigrant characters that I've been reading about and studying and doing these podcasts about, they seem to share that trait where they get passionate about something and then they start to realize other options within that field. And eventually they are able to create some really neat opportunities for themselves and for others through the process.
One thing that I can speak into from what you're saying, what I've observed, my parents were entrepreneurs. And I think if they had the ability to have gone in and learned a particular skill that would then enhance their ability to be entrepreneurs, it would have made a world of difference in terms of the scaling up of their business and the longevity of whatever they created, and creating that generational type of business that would outlive them, as opposed to being the entrepreneur, buying and selling goods, and always staying on a smaller scale.
I think when you come from Africa, one of the things I've realized is I remember growing up and having to go to my village and work the fields with my grandfather and other family members. And we were very much, everything that's done, at least that was done then at those villages, was very much at a subsistence level.
Yes.
And it feels like even a lot of the entrepreneurship that's happening in Africa that we grew up around was also at a subsistence level. You sell a few tomatoes so that tonight we have bread, we can take bread home. Yeah. And then tomorrow we try and sell again just so we can have bread. And this language of scaling and actually building, a business that lasts is fairly new. That concept to people that at least are coming from similar backgrounds as you and I. So I definitely understand that. So you end up in New York working, with a communications firm in healthcare. How long were you in New York, and then what did that lead to?
It was short-lived. I ended up staying only 18 months in New York, but I had the opportunity to continue working with the same company back in the UK. So I worked with them in total for about 5 years, and then moved to healthcare public relations for 3 years. And then I registered the formal, official first business that has continued for 21 years now. Okay.
So you moved back to the UK, continued to still work in healthcare, communications, and PR, and then took the plunge. Eventually, after a few years of experience, and at that point, I'm guessing your network had grown quite a bit to give you a bit of confidence that you'd be able to pull it off.
Yes, but there were also some attempts of starting businesses and failing. Yeah. There were attempts of doing different things. I tell a story of buying and selling women's clothes. So I was still trying to hold on to the passion that I had from when I was 16 years old, bringing it into the UK. So weekends I would go and invite friends to come over. I would be selling various retail products. And I tried so many different things. I think the one thing that I learned is in any enterprise that you create, don't overlook the fact that you still have bills to take care of. You still have a family to provide for. So plan well in what you do.
That's good. I like that a lot. So you finally register this this business
Yes.
that you end up really going into, and that business is running even today.
And it was actually someone else's idea. So a friend approached me and said, I need a nurse to be part of this because I'm not a nurse, I'm in real estate, but I need a nurse to work with.
So they needed your skill.
They needed my skill.
Exactly. And your qualification.
And my qualification.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, within 6 months, they had quit because it wasn't aligned with what they wanted to do. It wasn't headed in the direction that they wanted to. And administratively, it was demanding. Yeah. So there's a lot of legislation, a lot of regulations, a lot of compliance and standards that you have to uphold. And if you don't have the tenacity or the patience to understand, and you can't afford to bring in the skills and expertise at that time, it's not for everyone. So she exited and I continued.
And at that point, you're seeing the opportunity for yourself now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anything that I do, I put myself 200%.
Fascinating. And how old is this business now?
21 years.
21 years.
21 years.
That's impressive. That's impressive. Whenever I spend some time reading on statistics, on business ownership and things, I mean, it is alarming how few businesses actually make it, first of all, just to 12 months.
Yes.
And then to 5 years. And so to have been able to build a business that is running today and now basically runs with you living in another country is really impressive. Really
so I have something around that. I remember because it's in the healthcare space, which is regulated, you have to have an inspector coming in. So it was originally in my home. And the inspector came and sat across from me at the table, completed the interview, successful. And he says, don't get your hopes too high. There are other people who've been doing this or trying to do this for 3 years, and they've not succeeded. And they've shut down. I was like, okay, that's not my story.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'd love to hear how you feel being an immigrant impacted you in this journey of building a business that now is a full-grown adult at this point. Do you see your being an immigrant having worked in your favor, had worked against you? And just love your thoughts and perspective over the years.
So I think if you look at my life story, who I come from, my parents, my grandparents, they were entrepreneurs, they were pioneers. So they always went against the grain. So for me, that seed was planted in me already. I have never come into a place and said, I'll just be secondary and take whatever comes my way. I am curious enough to know, what is it that's at hand? How can I bring value at any point? And what is it that I actually need to get out of this situation? So I've always had that outlook on life. So coming into another country as an immigrant, I understood the luxury that had been afforded me by my father. That was a sacrifice. So I wasn't going to lose sight of that. I also understood the opportunities that would not be accessible to me had I stayed in Zimbabwe at that time. And again, I left Zimbabwe when things were really good. So most people actually thought I was crazy to leave. And then there was another aspect of when you're in a place and you've understood the direction you want to go in, you have to focus on it. You really have to focus on it. Most people say it's not working. It's not working because you're expecting to have the results of what someone applies in 3 years. You expect that to be within a month.
Right.
So you have to understand what it is you want to do and the direction in which you're headed in and to stick with it. And then you also have to be willing to review and accept when things are not working out, why, and be honest with yourself as well. So I've always been surrounded by a family that is not afraid of speaking into my inadequacies as well as my strengths. So there's a lot of encouragement, but there's also a lot of leveling up. When things are not going so well, there's a level of support.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you do see it as an advantage that you were an immigrant, where you basically arrived in the UK and almost burnt the boat.
I did.
Burnt the boat, and I've got to make this work. This is going to have to work for me because I'm not going back empty-handed, so to speak. How challenging was it back then to be an immigrant, to be a woman, a Black woman in the UK, trying to get into this space where I'd imagine there were not that many Black women or immigrants even who were trying to get into that space?
That's true. So it was challenging because there's a level of when you're in community, You hear what people are saying about the possibilities or the impossibility. And there's a number of people who'd say, oh, it's never been done before. It can't be done. So I believe most of the things that I've achieved in my life have always been against that in the backdrop where people say, oh, are you sure? That's never been done before. But my faith speaks otherwise. So I've always leaned on that level of faith that says I'm created to be fruitful, to multiply, to increase, to replenish. So whatever I do, there has to be that possibility of me making a significant difference, enough to be fruitful, enough to increase, and enough to have some level of dominion. So when we talk about market share, I don't necessarily have the highest market share, but we've been successful as a business. And that speaks into the tenacity that you must have. I've attended meetings where I'm sitting across from someone who makes a decision and they ask me, is your organization represented by people who look like you? And you say, what do you mean by that? Are they all black?
Right.
It's like, okay, are you concerned with the color of my skin or the ability that I have to provide the service or to do the work that needs to be done? So you will face, and I did face, a lot of challenges in that sense, that I'm going into a space that's not occupied by people who look like me, who come from where I come from, who have similar life experiences to what I have, but I have the resilience.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. One of the aspects of your story that really encourages me is that you left home at 18 and eventually started a business that's been successful, a business that's going today. And I know you've got other business ventures and other investments and things that you've gotten into and are working on even now as in this phase of your life. But you've never forgotten home. Yep. You've never forgotten where you come from. Can you talk to us about what it is that caused you to still hold on to your Zimbabwean-ness, your African-ness? I say this because I'm obviously asking questions because I know quite a bit about what you have done behind the scenes in Zimbabwe. And I'm putting you on the spot here probably, but I know that there are many, many, many young people in Zimbabwe that are in school right now that have been educated over the years directly because of work that you've done and because of your support. And I know that there's many, many you have plans to build infrastructure, schools and things like that you want to do. And I know you're going to do those things. What is it that's led you to giving back so much to the country that gave birth to you? Even when you really can just move on with your life and can enjoy life overseas and just use the money to make yourself happy and to treat yourself to all the pleasures of this world. What is it that made you so determined to continue to have an impact back home?
So I think for me, Zimbabwe has always been my place of belonging, where I am accepted, I'm celebrated, and I have that sense of nurturing from Zimbabwe. As I get older, as my father has died, as my mother is getting older, there's a question I still ask myself: would that sentiment remain even when they're no longer there? And I say absolutely yes, because that was the place of my identity. It's the place that made me understand who I am in this world. And I think there's something in me that's always said, I must return home. So home will always be home. I can be comfortable, I can be resident somewhere else, I can be a citizen somewhere else, but Zimbabwe is my place of belonging.
I love that. I love that. I was reading an article just this morning, actually, specifically about Zimbabwe, where the central bank governor was talking about how over 10% of Zimbabwe's GDP right now is supported directly by Zimbabwean citizens who are not in the country anymore, who are sending money on a regular basis.
Remittances.
And he was saying that this 10% number is only what they can track through formal channels.
Yes.
And we know that there's so much that happens informally because people who live and work in South Africa put money on the bus every single day. And there's no tracking those remittances and the money that's crossing the border. So I'm somebody who believes very much in the human asset being something that can be taken advantage of. Zimbabwe, I think, is unique from an African context. It has been for a while because Zimbabwe has always been one of those countries in Africa. And I think it's because of the British influence and the education system, at least that the country inherited going into independence, where teachers educated in Zimbabwe were attractive in other parts of the world. Doctors educated, nurses educated have always been attractive everywhere. And so I do believe that we're moving into a world where we can export, countries can export, actual physical goods, gold, stuff that's mined from the ground, or stuff that's manufactured. But I also believe that countries can take advantage of exporting the human asset that, people. Because when I'm hearing that 10, maybe even closer to 20% of Zimbabwe's GDP is being propped up by people that are not in the country because they're sending money on a regular basis, that tells me that there's a real opportunity that can be exploited. Now, I get frustrated sometimes because I feel like a lot of governments, the Zimbabwe government even, sometimes is seeing people leaving or these critical skills leaving as a threat. But I actually think it can be framed as an opportunity, and we could take advantage of it for the sake of the country of Zimbabwe and the continent of Africa. And so just my thoughts. And so I get excited when I know about the things that you're doing and how you're helping equip young people. And my hope and prayer would be that these young people eventually will be very significant contributors to the GDP of the country.
So one of the things that has always spoken to my heart or has resonated with me is the number of people who believed in me when they didn't need to. They saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at that time. And so when we talk about doing things in Zimbabwe, whether it's assistance with education, school fees, supplies, whether it's individuals who want to start up different business projects, microfinancing or a level of investment, or if it's individuals who need healthcare treatment, but they can't afford it. I think we have a duty and a responsibility, all of us who are doing well. There's that aspect of give a tenth of what you have to make a difference in the life of someone who has no capacity or will never be in a position to give you back. So I strongly believe that.
I believe that too. So that really excites me to hear you and to know that there are people out there that believe it, but are also living it. That's really cool. Talk to us about maybe some of the hard lessons that you've learned in your journey. And this can be hard lessons as an immigrant, can be hard lessons as a businesswoman, just hard life lessons. And just love for some of the people to hear from you, because I know you've been successful and there's so many incredible accomplishments that we can talk about that you typically don't want to talk about, and I understand. But what are some of the hard lessons as well that have made your life what it is today?
So hard lessons can be broken into so many aspects of my life. 2 failed marriages, those are hard lessons. Of course, there's reasons beyond that, but I think some of it speaks into the level of commitment that I had in building business. Hard lessons, the time lost with my children in the context of wanting to be able to provide for them beyond what I had access to growing up. Hard lessons are friendships that ended up in courts where you think you're working together and you're in agreement and in partnership, and a simple conversation could have resolved and you end up spending thousands, tens of thousands of pounds in court to resolve an issue that a judge throws out and says, this is not even a case to be presented here. Hard lessons, losing friends and loved ones and not having had enough time to spend with them. And hard lessons, I think it's the foundation of long-term relationships. So you get to a place where you might be successful materially and financially, but you are lost to a certain degree in the relationships that really matter at that stage of life. And you can't take those years back.
That's profound. That's profound. I appreciate you being vulnerable about those things. Everything you're saying makes sense. As I grow older too, you look back and you learn that there's trade-offs in life. When you are 100% focused on your business, then there's potentially other things that you're not as focused on. When you're 100% focused on building something in partnership with some people, not everybody is as engaged or as focused as you are, and that can lead to trouble and lead to issues. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because I know we always want to celebrate the successes.
Yes.
We always want to highlight those. But I've learned in life that life is a mix of ups and downs, But ultimately, when it all comes together, I think it is a beautiful story and a beautiful journey. And we're living in a world too with social media where the pressure's on to only show the positives and only highlight the positives. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because there's lessons for all of us in those. So thank you. You've been very vulnerable about the hard lessons. We talked about the the marriage challenges, or just the time away from your children as well. You've talked about the relationships that were negatively affected as part of this journey. Friends you started off in business with and things kind of going sideways and you regretting and wishing that some certain things had turned out differently. Is there anything else from those hard lessons that you would want to share that you think would be helpful?
Definitely. So I've had the misfortune of having to file bankruptcy, and that was the most devastating in terms of business. But when you now sit and speak with other people who've been in business, they say, wait a minute, after 21 years in business. So it's not to lose the impact of it, but it's devastating to actually file for bankruptcy, where you are at a certain level, you have an expectation, you're working towards achieving that. You have income coming in, but you're not being profitable. You try and sell the business, but no one is taking it. And then you have to file for bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's, part of the harsh realities of business, unfortunately. I think, like you said, the friends that highlight that the fact that in many ways that you've been in business this long and only have to go through that once, I think is positive, especially because you've started many businesses along the way. But having said that, I'd imagine that the process of making the decision to file for bankruptcy and going through the process is emotionally really difficult. I can't even imagine what you're going through, but there's a lot of questions, maybe some self-doubt, that comes out of it as well. But I'm encouraged that you've gone through that valley and you've dealt with that, and you've come out on the other side and are back to building again. And that, I think, is the big encouragement. And that's what I want to take away from it. That's what I hope people watching and those listening will take away from it, because life will throw punches at us.
Oh,
it will.
Yes,
and the question is, whenever life throws one punch that lays us down, do we stay down? Or do we summon the strength to get up again and keep moving forward? And my hope and prayer for me and for everybody watching and all these aspiring immigrants would be that when they hit the canvas because life threw a punch, that they find a way to get back up and keep building, keep moving forward.
I think I've actually come back with more veracity. I've come back with a fiercer punch. I've come back in a reflective stance where when you have enough of a support structure around you and they speak into the blind spots that you might have, and you take that on and you look in the mirror. I call it a naked look in the mirror experience, where you're saying, okay, this could have been different. This needed to be changed sooner than later. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but it's called school fees. So I paid the school fees.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for being vulnerable about that. That's really, really impactful. There are many young people that I'm in communication with, who are immigrants themselves, or many young people that are looking to immigrate from their home countries. Some that will listen to this podcast, others that we interact with in the work that I do. Even here, I work with a lot of newly arrived immigrants in the country who are just starting out in their journey as Americans. What are some of the kind of words of encouragement that you would have? What's some of the perspective that you'd want to share, given your journey and what you've learned?
So someone asked me that question this week, and they said, if you were to talk to the 20-year-old Effie, what would you have said, or what would you have done differently? And I would have said, don't hold back. Once you've understood what your purpose in life is, or while you're figuring it out, there are certain things that you're drawn to, that you naturally are good at, and there are things that you'll develop along the way, but don't hold back. Don't allow the yeses of other people to remove you from what you're called to do. So that's what I said, that if I could do it again, I would understand opportunities that are presented for what they really are, and I would maximize on those opportunities, and I wouldn't delay. I would move speedily to achieve that.
That makes a lot of sense. I think if you're watching, if you're listening, and you're considering immigrating or you're a recent immigrant, don't hold back. Every opportunity in front of you is worth taking full advantage of, because you just don't know where that opportunity will lead and what that will springboard into. Don't hold back. I like that. I like that a lot. That's 2024. That'll be my motto, not holding back, for sure. I love that. Can you talk to us as we wrap up about what it is that you're building now, what you're working on right now that perhaps you want people to know about, but also just as a way to continue to encourage and inspire us?
Okay, so it's 1,000 businesses by 2025.
1,000 businesses.
1,000 businesses by 2025.
Wow.
And what I mean by that, it's the businesses that I will have impact in a number of ways. So there's coaching and mentoring, there's business development, there's counseling for different business aspects where people are trying to figure out what it is they need to do to scale their business up. There is partnership opportunities. There are investors coming in looking for opportunities to invest in. So there's a number of things, but I felt like if I've achieved this level of success with my different teams in different businesses, can you imagine if we can achieve that with 1,000 businesses?
That's encouraging. That's exciting. Very exciting. And so what is the vehicle now that you're using to impact 1,000 businesses by 2025?
So I've partnered with Sarah Garande, and we've created an initiative called the Legacy Mentorship Program.
Okay.
And the Legacy Mentorship Program looks at different aspects, not only the business aspect, but the emotional and social and the identity of an individual who is embarking on the journey of doing business. So we've created a program where we spend 3 months with different individuals looking at analyzing their business, assisting them with the different systems that they need to implement to grow their business. But it also looks at other aspects of that, the financing, the scaling up, and then the finishing strong. I think a lot of businesses, if they had the opportunity to access the resources and the individuals that they needed in their sector or specialism and have them speak into what they're doing, that would make a difference. So, and the Legacy Mentorship Program is also looking at different generations. So you've got the boomers who are retiring, who have done well in business. They're serving in a counseling role. So they have an ability to lift people up to a certain level of understanding. Then the younger population have an understanding of technology that we don't necessarily have and an ease of using it that benefits us in being more efficient and creating better systems in our businesses. So it's bringing 3 or 4 generations together through the Legacy Mentorship Program to spark a difference in how we do business and to grow businesses that last longer, that outlive us.
In my own business journey, recently, in the last several months, actually gotten a business coach for the first time, really. And it's been fascinating just how many blind spots you have that you don't acknowledge, don't realize you have, because you're just so focused on the daily grind. And so I'm meeting with this business coach on a regular basis, and I'm explaining something that I'm doing or a strategy we're implementing, and then a simple question, but why are you doing it like that? And then you pause and you kind of think, I don't know, this is kind of how I've always done it. But what if you do it like this and like that? And how are you doing your reporting and doing this? And so I'm learning, even as I'm growing older and hopefully maturing as a business person, that embracing accountability is a critical ingredient to success. And so I think that you guys are looking to impact 1,000 businesses in the next couple of years, with that mentorship, with that coaching. I think those that do take full advantage of it, that take it seriously, will benefit. And so I'm glad you're doing that. Is there anything else you're working on that you want to share?
Yes. So I have created several products. One of them is, a lot of people have side hustles that they call business. So there's a system that we've created that helps you turn that side hustle into a 7-figure business.
Okay.
It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not that type of product, but it's giving people the processes, the systems that they need to implement to make sure whatever business you're building is solid and will outlive. I keep talking about outliving because it's important that we create things that have a life outside of our own capability.
That's right. Sustainable. Absolutely.
Sustainable.
Absolutely. So for that product that you're talking about, that young man or young woman who does have a side hustle, I'm doing some catering, I make cakes on the side. On the weekends, I'm an MC at events or whatever. Or like you were talking about, I go to work as a nurse, but I also have kind of my own at-home boutique I'm running, where I've got clothes and shoes and things that I think are real trendy and real nice, that can really be a blessing to the world and make people feel good about themselves and so on. You've got a mechanism you've created to help someone go from, it's just a little something I'm doing on the side, to potentially getting it to an actual business that is making 7 figures.
So it's a 4-step process. Identifying what it is.
Okay.
creating the processes that you then implement that, accessing the finances and understanding the resources that are required, and then finishing strong.
I like it. That sounds
Very
straightforward.
simple,
Straightforward. And will work with any idea, really, right?
It'll work with any idea. But the one commitment you must have is to actually do it.
Yeah.
So we've had people who've participated in the program who have successfully implemented it. We are seeing their businesses growing. It's still quite a small number of people, but the results are encouraging enough. And I've lived it. So for the last 20 plus years, I've lived that process, which is now captured in a system.
That's awesome.
So I have a lot of information on my website, which is effiemedia.com, which is EFFIE. That's EFFIE, effiemedia.com.
Media.com. And then you're on social media too, right? Active on Instagram,
Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube.
And Effie Media is how to find you on all platforms?
Yes.
Okay.
Effie Media.
There you have it. Effie Media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, but also effiemedia.com.
Effiemedia.com
is the parent website.
Yes.
And so I know I recently was on the website and saw that you've got some ebooks and books that you've written that are part of this course that you've developed. And so I'm excited to check those out and also be able to hopefully use those resources to level up myself in my journey. So.
Yes, there's a lot of resources available that speak into every aspect of business.
Oh, glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure having Effie Hwande on this Immigreats podcast interview. It's the first time we've done it in this format, and I'm really excited to get feedback from you all about this particular episode. The heart behind this, like I said earlier, is to give opportunities to immigrants that have made tremendous impact in their adopted countries, but also are making tremendous impact in their countries of birth. I do believe it is possible to make impact in both places, and it's something that I'm trying to encourage as many immigrants as I can, because I think it is important. Her story is incredible, experienced some incredible highs, incredible success, but she's also been very vulnerable about some of the hard lessons and the struggles that she's had to deal with in her journey. I love how vulnerable and practical she's been, because this is true to life. It's not all glitz and glamour. It's not always smiles and high fives. But we are able to kind of persevere and get through the difficult situations and come out on the other side and continue to build. She's talking about finishing strong, and I don't doubt that however many decades she still has in front of her, she's one lady who will finish strong.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us today. Catch us next time. You can find us, the Immigreats podcast, too, on our website, immigrates.net. You can sign up for our newsletter where we send out notifications for new episodes that we've released, and also just send out other information about what we're trying to build here at Immigreats. You can also find us on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, and on Twitter under the name Immigreats, or Immigreats_, I believe is our actual handle on those platforms. Until next time, thanks for watching.